how do you survive in the zombie apocalypse?
I immediately know it's zombies. I didn't go and check it out. I feel like that's the number one thing is people want to go actually see it. Like if you're hearing people screaming and you're hearing like fighting and commencing going on, I'm going the opposite direction. And where I was going towards was Dillard's. I don't know if you've ever been to a Dillard's, but they have great clothing, business clothing, overcoats, suits, things like that. So
That's your choice?
for some reason, that
And
was in my dream.
man wants to look professional for the zombie
That's not my
apocalypse.
choice.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 1% podcast. I'm your host, Vin,
I'm Shane.
and today we have some cool topics for you. We have two topics that we think you're going to love.
Oh, yeah.
One is, first up, how do you survive in the zombie apocalypse? I've thought about this a lot, so I guess we'll have a good little debate on that. And then the second topic is going to be focused on moving on. How do you navigate adversity in life and business? How do you know when it's time to pivot? How do you know when it's time to quit? Or realistically, how do you know when it's the best time to shift and accept what's going on around you? So we got a lot of cool stuff today. Let's jump in. Shane wants to tell us about his dream. That's actually what's going to spark the whole zombie thing today. Apparently, he was having a dream about it. So let's hear a little about this.
So, how do you survive a zombie apocalypse? I feel like that's kind of a loaded question, right? Especially for somebody who has no survival skill set. For somebody who is overweight, I'm sure I'm talking to a few of you people out there as well who share the same characteristics as me.
Wait, you're describing yourself?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh.
But mine was, what do you do? And I'll throw in how do you survive and my tactics and standpoints here. But once again, I just wanted to have some relevance here or preset that I don't know anything about anything outside of, killing business and being in my opinion, a rock star husband and father. Don't ask my wife, she might disagree. But my dream, which I'm sure everybody has a zombie dream here and there, mine was so vivid that I was in California. My wife and son are living in Vegas, out there for a business meeting. And all of a sudden, of course, I didn't have any story or background. Zombies started coming out of nowhere. So my immediate thought is, I'm hearing this rumbling and hearing the background. I immediately know it's zombies. I didn't go and check it out. I feel like that's the number one thing is people want to go actually see it. Like if you're hearing people screaming and you're hearing like fighting and commencing going on, I'm going the opposite direction. But in my mind, I knew it was zombies. So I had to run, and where I was going towards was Dillard's. I don't know if you've ever been to a Dillard's, but they have great clothing, business clothing, overcoats, suits, things like that. So
that's your choice?
For some reason, that was in my dream.
Man wants to look professional for the zombie apocalypse.
That's not my choice. So for some reason, there was a very arrogant, narcissistic person there who was like, you can't afford these clothes. You can't afford these suits. And so I actually went there. And now at this time, I have a cooler. Like I have a cooler in my hands because I'm thinking I need to put ice and food and for the baby and my son and my wife. So I need to grab a big cooler. So the Dillards locked all their doors. So I took the cooler and I smashed through the windows. And the guy, this narcissistic guy, the salesman type guy, comes over to me and goes, you can't. And I immediately take my cooler and I punch him right in the face. And I say, you need to give me your car keys right now. Because I'm in California. And so I need to get to Vegas. So he ends up lying there on the floor. He's got a big bloody nose on there. And he ends up giving me his car keys. And I said, see, next time, maybe you'll treat people with a little respect. I don't know why, but it felt good when I did it. Once again, I don't do these types of things. This is in my dream. Apparently I have, this alter ego. But so anyways, I got a whole bunch of missed calls from the wife. I don't end up making there because I end up waking from my dream, but I'm trying to plan it out. So I tell Vin, a little bit of this story, obviously not much in detail. I'm like, what would you do in a zombie apocalypse? He's like, let's talk about it. So there's their preset from my dream here. What I would do. First, I would have to do some research on my city. Is it infected? is where essentially is this going towards? Because if it started in California and it hasn't got to Vegas yet, I know it's just a matter of time. I'm not the type of person to hunker down, but I'm also a realist of the situation. My wife is 8 months pregnant, so I'm going to have to try to find somebody or try to learn myself how to home deliver. At that point, I can't just constantly be on the run. I know the freeways are essentially just going to be a madhouse. They're going to be jam-packed, and I don't think that's the way of going. So at this point, it's higher grounds. Do I look and do I go into higher grounds? What's the closest higher ground mountains to me? Can I go into a cabin? I have a couple of guns. I know how to start a fire. I'll tell my wife to get everything in coolers as much as we can. And do we just go into a cabin? Now, at this point, how long is that going to last? So it's hard. It's hard for somebody like me with no major skill sets, with a wife who's 8 months pregnant. Being a realist, I would say the best thing for me to have the best standards is to hunker down into my house. And I know that's not the right thing, but in my situation, I'd have to do that. The worst part about it is I would have a newborn baby, hopefully. I have a dog that's very loud that I might have to take care of. And I have a 2-year-old son who has no idea what's going on. If none of those were in factor in place, it'd be a different story. And I would probably tell you something different. But I would hunker down. I'd load all the weapons. I'd booby trap my house. And I would probably raid grocery stores and just try to survive as long as I could.
I'd miss you when you die.
Yep.
So that's just a terrible idea. All of it. Like there's no part of that I could agree with. I would see you dead soon.
Let's hear it, yours.
Well, I believe it's a very simple thing. So one is, they have like 24 seasons of this show called The Walking Dead, where, they're literally just kind of showing all the shenanigans that happen. So one, you're going to get probably the worst parts of people because everybody's going to be in a survival state. So people are actually going to be probably more of a threat than a zombie. Now, it depends, right? Because there's different types of zombies if you watch different types of zombie movies. Some of them are super fast. Some of them are really slow. If we have super fast zombies, I'll kill myself. I'm not dealing with that shit. I'm not going to deal with, like, zombies running at the speed of light at me.
Like World War Z.
If they're walking, I'm chill. I'll keep living. I'll keep going. I'm not dealing with speed zombies. Not happening. So that's first up. Second is you want to get as far away from civilization because of two things. One, that's where the biggest concentration of zombies are going to be. And number two is that's where people are going to think to come and raid because they're going to look for homes. They're going to look for places where supplies could be, which is going to be a home or a store or restaurants especially. So all the places you're thinking of raiding, everybody's already thinking of raiding it. So if there's not already somebody hunkered down there, then they're going to go there. They might see you there. They might want whatever you have. They might figure out how you got there. They might even follow you back home. People will be a bigger threat than the zombies as long as they're walking. Now, number two is you want to have things that you know how to do. You want to have some survival. So I've been building forts in the woods since I was like, I don't even know, man, 6 or 7 years old. I would sneak into the woods. I wasn't allowed. And I would just start digging out spaces to create a ground, and then I would start assembling sticks and rocks and building walls and all this great stuff just in clearings in the forest that I would make, and then some jerk kids would always come and knock it down. I don't know, probably teenagers, whatever. So I've been doing like stuff like that for a while, and I could say you probably want to go into the mountains. I already have the perfect idea of where I would go, but I'm not going to disclose the location for the sake of if there's ever actually... no, I'm dead serious. If there's ever a zombie apocalypse, I know where I'm going. It's about 2.5 hours away from where I live. It is somewhat upstate New York, and it's going to be a place that is fully abandoned, I'm sure. And if it's not, then what you do, and this is what I suggest, is you're also going to need to start a community. And it's funny because we actually talk a lot about community on this podcast. However, when you think about what the world will look like in a post-apocalyptic world, is you're going to see tribes form. You're going to see people get behind a leader. And so what I would attempt to do is in this space that I'm going to go to, if people were to come, instead of trying to delete them off the planet. I would attempt to build a community with them and create a new type of civilization. And so I believe in that setting we would have fresh water, we would be up in the woods, we would have the ability to hunt fish, all that good stuff. And then it would really just be a matter of building protection. Like, how would we do that? Well, we'd go into the local surroundings, we'd probably chop down trees, build up barricades, barriers. These are just some of the main ideas. And of course, I already have a box like this of survival gear because I like hiking and I like camping and all
Same.
that. So I have fire starters, I have axes, I have crossbows. I have stuff that won't require me to go get bullets. Now, don't get me wrong. I think guns are going to be top tier in the zombie apocalypse, but you also want to have things that don't require bullets that can also aid you. So swords, axes, just even probably honestly some armor. It could ward off a bite. Put on forearm guards. Put on the things where you might most likely get bit, so that there's less opportunity and exposure to get infected. So these are some of the plans that I have. And I guess if I was separated from my girl and my kid, the goal would probably be to try and get to them as quick as possible.
100%.
Although there's actually another idea here too, because my girl could drive and she knows how, and we have a car seat. And even if she didn't have my car, because she knows how to drive, I would probably just tell her where we would meet so that she could get there too. Maybe we'd have to meet. Like, we'll see.
Like I said, it's all circumstantial. Like, I think that would be my number one thing too, is I would try to. I have a buddy who has his own airplane, and hopefully I'm a good enough friends where I can go on there. But with a wife who's about to give birth and a 2-year-old and a dog, like, it's such tough decisions. The last thing that we're going to do is try to travel out there to the woods and survive. Like, that's so tough. Just, I feel like if I was alone or if it was just my wife and we didn't have kids, easy answer, go up north, go to the mountains. It's easier to scavenge, or try to find some sort of shelter and food and build up a community. I definitely feel like you've just watched The Walking Dead and you've just literally listed everything there. And then eventually you're going to tell me then the community is going to be versus community, and then it's going to be people versus people and territories. And
Yeah, that's what winds up happening. Now, I haven't watched The Walking Dead in years, but it's just people will, if you look at psychology, people will go into a survival state and self-preservation. And a lot of the times what people wind up doing in those survival states is usually out of character, but out of character means that they do things that are harmful. And
Right.
they're going to want what you have. They're going to need your
100%.
supplies, especially as supplies become more rare. If you don't start developing your own agriculture or your own system to hunt fish, things like that, you're going to need. And so if you have all the weapons but none of the food, what you're going to do is you're going to take the weapons and go get some food. And vice versa. If you have all the food and none of the weapons, you're going to give all your food to someone who has all the weapons.
I mean, that's how we are, as animalistic, especially when it comes to being survival as well. I do think your soul and, being a human in general does have a fact in it. Like, 'cause obviously none of us are a fan of cold-blooded murder. But if it came down to it, are you going to do what you need to do to feed your family? It's a tough question to answer, So, but I agree with yours. If for some reason cell phones are working, I'm texting Vin, where are you? We're going to try to make it to New York.
Oh, I'll tell you. I'll let you know after the podcast. I just don't want anybody having my spot.
I think it's going to be a little bit of a drive and or a walk from Vegas.
No. You're getting your friend with the plane. You better get a lot closer to that guy and tell him, hey, listen, if anything happens, this is where we're going. It's the perfect spot.
Right. Well, hopefully that little single propeller engine can make it from Vegas to New York in one shot without refueling.
The engine that could, baby.
Yeah. Well, I think that is it's great. I'm curious on what your guys' or if you guys have thought of this zombie apocalypse that will never happen, but if it does, what are you going to do? And I think that's a good segue into our our main talking point today is overcoming. And I feel like Vin's got some great stories of personal and success of either something that's happened in your life and that how you've overcome it, or how you've seen different opportunities and taken advantage of it. I got to share about my dream and or my dream and what I would do, and I'd be dead in, probably less than a week. So how do you overcome, failure and disappointment? Yeah.
I've come to learn that a lot of the times you can't really control any of that, right? And I think that's a reoccurring theme of life for not just myself but everyone. Is we were talking about this before the podcast, and I actually heard it on a motivational video this morning. So it was really, I don't even want to say coincidental. It's really the theme of today is talking about change is inevitable, but progress is optional. Progress is your choice. And oftentimes we get stuck in change because we don't want it. We don't like it. We weren't ready for it, right? Everybody always has these ideas. Even when you think about having a kid, people always ask, well, when's the best time to have a kid? It's like never. And also anytime, because it's never the right time. There's always going to be something else you want to do, something else you could do, should do, would do, and then you're going to have the kid, and then you have to start adjusting your life, and then everything changes, and then that just is what it is, and now you have to adjust many things to accommodate this tiny little selfish human. However, you could also look at the other perspective, and I think these two go hand in hand, is that change is inevitable, progress is an option, and the other one is pain is inevitable, and suffering is a choice.
Mm.
So a lot of the times we have this pain that comes with change, but the way that we're viewing it is what's actually causing us a deeper discomfort. We are causing our own suffering by not embracing and accepting change. And I've had many different changes in my life. I've been cheated on multiple times in multiple different relationships, actually. I've essentially changed careers. I shouldn't say that's even a bad thing. I've wanted to. But of course, there's always that thought of, well, did I just waste all this time? Could I have done something better? Right? You're always going to have those questions or those thoughts of is even this the right decision? So you're going to have to learn how to adapt a lot in life. And for me, I've come up with this idea that there has been a recurring theme that most of my life has been pushed in a direction I didn't want it to go. Even if things worked out for the better, I didn't really want it to go in that direction in the first place, but I then had to shift because there's nothing you could do about it. I mean, the biggest thing, for instance, is like the love of my life, which is my daughter. That was an accident. And my girl was going to keep that kid whether I was involved or not. So that was a change that I had to prepare for. That was a change I had to just look at. That was a change that I had to shift my mindset and my value system and everything to start a new type of life. I mean, I got cheated on by my ex. There was the consideration of what could I have done better here? There's the consideration of how did I play a role in that? And when you start looking at how you were either a active or inactive participant, you start getting different answers. When you believe you're an inactive participant and things are happening to you, you're going to suffer and you're going to be resistant to it. When you realize that you actually have the opportunity to meet every single situation in life with enthusiasm, you get to choose the outcome, your emotions, your relationships. You get to choose everything, but it has to start with that active participation. So, the biggest lesson or the biggest thing that I've learned in life is become an enthusiastic and active participator.
I think there's a lot to be said about this topic. Adaptation and evolving is definitely goes hand in hand with our 1% mindset and community that Vin and I are currently building right now, and the mindsets that we have. And I think the number one struggle that people have is comfortability.
Mm,
Now, it could be in their personal relationship, it could be in their business, but when you're comfortable with things, you don't necessarily seek change or
yeah.
seek improvement because you're comfortable, you're used to it, you're familiar with things. And I honestly am not a big fan in business with comfortability. I've said this multiple times on this podcast, and then hears me see it. you have to change, you have to evolve, because that's how business is. In our last podcast, we talked about AI and how it's here, and it's to say we have to change, we have to evolve to learn how to, meet up with the times. Now, for this segment, I wanted to kind of bring it back towards, you is you were a firefighter and you gave that up to chase a dream. You followed in your father's footsteps as being a therapist, but not only did you do that, you wanted to be better than that. Your father was full time, you said 40, 50, 60 hours a week with patients. I think that was a side job as well, too, if I'm not mistaken, or there was another job. But what you wanted to do is you wanted to niche down being with business coaches and therapists. But more importantly, you chased that dream. You gave up having a very good career with great benefits, where you also had to beat out probably hundreds of competitors to get this. And instead, you chased your dream. That's huge. Like, you actually changed something, you went for it. And that's the big difference that, we've been talking about for, all these episodes here. I feel like that's kind of a common theme, is just doing it. Like, that's so crazy, is that 1% is just what you did, what you chased, what you risked for, and where you are today.
Right.
And I think
You
this
know,
applies. Go ahead.
go for it. Finish your thought.
I was just saying, I think this really applies to your mindset of adaptation, evolving, and change. Then I love what you said, that pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. And that's 100% true. It's really all how you view things. And, I'm going to do a quick little story here of what happened with me and my business, because a lot of you don't really know. I had a business partner in Restaurant Secret Weapon, which is kind of funny that I'm actually rocking that polo here right now. And the business partner and I were best friends, and we're actually really good friends today. We ran this company for 4 years. I was front end, he was back end, meaning I would capture all the sales and clients, and he would actually do all of the ads. And we were at each other's throats. It's tough. When one thing wasn't working, when the ads aren't working, I was at him. When I wasn't bringing enough sales, he was at me. And it was no way to treat a great friendship. And eventually, this lasted 3.5, 4 years, where he wanted to go his own way. He thought that he could take the business, to different levels. So I actually said, okay, let me think of how I want to respond here. That week, I created the VA group, which is a huge success in my opinion. It's now a need instead of a want in my client's eyes and in my eyes. And ultimately, I got my friend back. We're still really great friends. I have the VA group, which is a success. But instead of going home and saying, oh no, woe is me, now I have to do, this, I took that and I ran with it. And I was backed into a corner where I had nothing. And I said, what do I do now? How can I, be better than he ever was? It was almost like a competitive type of mindset. But the moral is, I saw an opportunity and I took advantage of it. And that's what I loved about you, is you had a comfortable, cushy career. A lot of people really need to understand this. Firefighters have amazing benefits and a great salary, and you save people's lives. You have a great, cushy career. It's not what you wanted to do. So you took that and you ran with it. And now you do this every day in your life. And I love that, we share this in common about, having that type of mindset and adaptation and evolving in ourselves. And I've been talking a lot about it, but anyways, I'm passionate about this. So, and that's what I see in you too, which is why I think we get along so well.
Well, thanks, man. I think it is really important to note that when you're in these spaces, and I've actually had a bunch of careers that people covet. So I was able to get a role as, for instance, a school social worker in the Department of Education, which is New York City's city job, right? Where you just go up in salary. You're after X amount of time, you're guaranteed like $150,000 as a salary. You get summers off, you get weekends off, you get out of school by 3 o'clock. You basically live and then, I don't know how many people know
Yeah,
this,
good
but at
life.
least in New York, It's a pretty good life, and at least in New York, and I'm sure it's probably like this across all other states as well, because I think the Board of Ed is a standard for the school system, but I'm not sure how it all works, so don't quote me. But in the Board of Ed, realistically, between the weekends off, the holidays, the vacations, summer break, winter break, spring break, we're only really working about 180 days out of the year, actually.
Right.
So I was basically guaranteed, if I just kept that job, to work 180 days a year, get out every day at 3 o'clock, have my weekends off, have 2 months off paid, right? The summers are paid. There was so much opportunity there to just live a really good life and get over six figures, have city health, city benefits, city coverage, a city pension, all that good stuff, right? And then I left that as I pursued becoming more of a one-to-one therapist and landing into a private practice. And then I left that to also pursue becoming a firefighter, which it's not even competition of hundreds of people, it's competition of thousands. There's over 80,000 applicants every 4 years, and you have to be in the top percent because they only take about 5,000 applicants to within that 4 year period. So it's highly competitive. You have to actually score roughly over 100 on the test, which you can only do if you get 100 and have some additional credits. That's how you get guaranteed in. So I had 103 on the exam, which put me at number 1217 on the list, which made me the second class to go into the fire academy. And it's very interesting because there's a few ways of looking at it. Is one that I wasted a lot of time, which I don't believe is true. And I think if I believed that, I'd probably feel pretty upset about it. But the other way is that I was gaining experience and I was learning what's just not a great fit for me. And both of those were actually childhood dreams of mine. One of them was to become a therapist like my dad, and the other was to be a firefighter because, like, I think every boy or every young boy wants to be something that they believe is heroic. You want to do something that you believe is going to make you a badass, or it's going to make you cool, or you're going to be saving someone's life, or you're going to do something of value. And so firefighting was that. So imagine the disappointment in my eyes, at least at the time, where both the things I worked virtually my entire life for, because you could ask my parents, you could ask any of my parents' friends, from the time I was about 6 years old, I told everyone I would be a therapist and a firefighter. I said I would do that from like kindergarten, and everybody can quote that in my life and verify that. And I did both of those things by the time I was 28. So I achieved all of my life streams by the time I was 28 and realized I didn't want any of it. And I mean, I think that was probably the most interesting thing to turn around and realize. And so the biggest way that I started shifting that was realizing actually what I was in love with wasn't either of the careers. It was just finding a way to serve and show up and support in this world. And when I transitioned again to entrepreneurship, I had realized the biggest thing was that I wasn't necessarily in love with what I was doing to a high degree. That's why I left. But it was also embracing the idea that I don't care how I serve, I just wanted to serve. And that made it so I could detach a little bit because, yeah, it's scary. It's always scary transitioning. It's scary having three careers in 3 years. And two of them are probably once in a lifetime opportunities, right? Like the fire department was a once in a lifetime because in New York, you age out after 29 years old. I got in at 28. If I didn't get in at that time, I could never become a firefighter ever again in New York City, at least. And getting a job in the Board of Ed, that's extremely hard. You need to have somebody actually vouch for you, which after going around to almost 100 schools with my resume, somebody finally was willing to let me in and vouch for me. And it's interesting, man, because you don't always know where you're going to end up, but you have to switch how you look at it. And so I believe that all of those things had ultimately led me to being able to say, I learned a lot. I stepped more into my purpose because I knew where my purpose wasn't. And I did things that I felt were purposeful. And that's what gave me the better clarity and conclusion that they weren't for me because I actually tried it, because I did it, because I followed through with it. And even though things were hard, especially in the fire academy, because I realized, funny enough, I realized about halfway through the fire academy that it wasn't actually what I wanted to do because they used to yell at us while we were doing drill, and they would be like, come on, sound off like you want this. And I'm like, I don't actually want this. and and then I said to myself, you know what? This is still the academy. Maybe I do truly want this. Maybe I'm just being, letting my inner bitch win. And so I'm complaining and saying I want to quit. So let me actually stick it through and see. And so I gave the fire department the fair shot that I believe it deserved. And I served and I went out into the field and I went to some fires and I helped save some lives and did some, interesting things while I was there. And then I was realizing, you know what? It truly, the feeling I had in the academy is real. It's truly not for me. And I really feel more purpose driven and more called to serve people in coaching and speaking in these capacities. And so transition after transition, and still some transitions going on in my life to this day. I think that everything is always is leading me to the right place. And part of it is trusting the process. So if there's anything anybody got from that long-winded story, I hope it's that you learn to trust the process a little more and allow yourself to give yourself the opportunity to change and create transition.
I think my wife is she's been a school teacher for her entire career, and that's what she's wanted to do since she was a little kid until she became a mother. And now I know that this is what she wants to do. She wants to be the best mom that she could be to her children,
Mm,
and that just goes the exact same thing as far as comfortability. When you were a child, you thought one way. When you were in your 20s, you thought one way. When you're
mm,
here, you thought a certain way. But the difference is instead of just being comfortable with your situation, you actually realized that this wasn't a good fit for you and you made the moves. And I think that's so important to look at because a lot of people don't do that. And I think that's really needs to be just that blanketed statement. If you're wanting change, then make it happen. I'm sure you hear, I definitely hear, especially from my friends who've been stuck, don't want to make a change because of X, Y, and Z. They're they're scared. They don't know how. They're afraid of success. They don't trust themselves. There's so many things and excuses, in my opinion, that they just don't do it because they're comfortable. And it's the same thing, unfortunately, in relationships too. They're afraid of being alone. Now,
yeah.
I just think that's once again the 1% mentality is we love evolving, we love adapting, we love trying new things and filling our jar with different opportunities. And yet, does that jar tip over and we have to put other stuff in that jar and see how it works? Absolutely, but we go with the flow. And I think that's what's so great about seeing other people and meeting other people that are exactly like us and having an entire family and running multiple businesses and doing investments and still having the time to want to meet people, want to adapt, want to change, want to grow. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. It's almost like people at their full potential. They're not limiting themselves. And I idolize that. I've idolized that since I was young. And I've always wanted to strive to be more like these type of people who can handle and juggle so much. So hearing your story, it almost like gets me going. Like, hell yeah, Vin, go Vin. Like I want to see like another like movie about it too. Like I love stuff like that. I don't like this. I'm gonna try something else. This is what I love. This is what I'm passionate about. Because a lot of people don't have that. I never had that. I never woke up or any single day and said I wanted to be this. I wanted to be a policeman, a firefighter, go into the Navy or whatever it may be. I never had dreams and ambitions until I actually started the VA group, and now I'm so passionate about people, about helping companies, about helping my employees, like seeing their better lifestyles. Like it drives me, it motivates me to want to do better for them. Anyways, I think the moral is don't be afraid of change. Don't put it into a corner. If you want to better your life, whether it's successfully, personally, however it may be, even mentally, you have to make a change. You have to do it.
And to that point, you also have to invest in yourself. And whatever that looks like. It might not be a super high level, high priced coach. It might be a book. It
Agreed.
might be Google search. It might be just putting a few hours in learning a program that you found for free online. It doesn't have to be when people talk about investment, right? There's different levels. And if you have a lot of money, you can invest that way. If you don't have a lot of money, but you have a lot of time, you can invest your time, which I might argue is actually even more valuable than money. So think about when you want to do something, how do you plan to invest in yourself so that other people want to invest in what you're doing? And for me, that was probably the biggest thing that allowed my coaching to take off is that I invested a lot into myself in my transitional period. I also overinvested, so don't do that. I overinvested money that I never bet on money that you're projected to have
Amen.
because I invested money that I was assuming was going to be there and then it wasn't. And that's a scary thing when you're starting out and you have no experience in entrepreneurship. So that was one of my harder moments. So learn from my lesson right there. Just by listening to this podcast, I might have saved you some money and hopefully given you some insight and given you some ways to invest in yourself other than the dollar amount. But always look to invest in yourself if you want to grow. That's number one, what you need to do. And get around people. Invest in yourself and get around people. So join communities like the 1%, or join other communities if the 1% is out of your budget. Make it a goal to join the 1% later. But you want to invest in yourself, find the right people, and lastly, what Shane was talking about is just to explore and know what your purpose is. Because if you don't know what your purpose is and you don't have certainty, you're going to act uncertain. And in uncertain actions comes terrible results. And in terrible results comes the failure of your endeavor. So make sure as you go through this process, if you're considering taking the leap and becoming an entrepreneur, following your passion, you have those three things in mind. How will you invest in yourself? Who are you going to get around? And what is your why? What is your passion? Why are you about to do what you're going to do? And if you can't answer those three questions, you're not ready. Go back to the drawing board and then start.
I really wanted to emphasize one thing that Vin said here is invest in yourself. You know, there was I was actually watching a an interview, um, and it was actually with Tony Robbins as he was being interviewed, which is, you know, Vin and I both love Tony Robbins, but Tony Robbins was saying that typically successful business owners, they have one brilliant, great idea, right? That kind of funds their future endeavors and things like that. But they're constantly
Mm,
chasing that one brilliant idea that they had that made them a bunch of money or that made them extremely successful. So, what do these brilliant one percenters do? They read books, they read self help books, they read about other people who have also had 1% mindsets, ideas, because that also triggers their highly entrepreneurship mindset about these other people who wrote books about how they became successful and their step by steps. And then it's almost like a roadmap. It's like a blueprint. And they take that and they utilize it for their next venture. He said, typically when I talk to successful people, they read anywhere between 25 to 50 books a year, which I'm definitely not at that level. I think that's nuts. But hopefully
mm.
one time or one day I have the time and I can get to that level because I absolutely agree. You know, I often quote Robert Kiyosaki because he's one of my favorite. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant. I even like Money Is, The 4 Hour Work Week. Those are some of my staples. But I love reading self-help or audiobooks, self-help books because the same thing. They're speaking my language. And if I can take just one little piece of their book or what they said and it can better my life, it's helped me hand over fist multiple times where it's made me rethink some things.
Mm.
So I love that you said invest in yourself with books because I absolutely agree with that.
Anything you can do to move the needle forward will help you as an entrepreneur or person.
And it's a cheap way of
So
doing it. I mean, you're talking about an audiobook anywhere from $8 to $25 at most.
yeah, or even hey, listen, there's even some free stuff online now. Like I have a reading assignment that I give to every single brand new client. It's called As a Man Thinketh, and you could get the book for free on audio on YouTube. So now it goes even far beyond that. Is you want to read a book, maybe you don't even have to pay for it. I think the biggest thing is also this is bringing one more topic in mind is overcome your excuses. Oh, I don't even have $20 for a book. Okay, get a book for $10. I don't even have $10. Great, go to YouTube, find it for free, or go to Google and search how you can get snippets of it for free, or just go somewhere. Like there's a million opportunities now, especially with the internet, that if you're not successful, it's your friggin' fault. Period.
Man,
So that's my last thought on this.
I absolutely agree with you. I don't make excuses in my life. You know, I see opportunities and I figure them out. It's the best part about change.
100% gives us a new opportunity to look at something different that maybe we didn't consider before to get an outcome we weren't going to have any sooner.
Amen.
I love it. Excellent. Well, we are going to close it out here for today, folks. Thank you for tuning in again to the 1% podcast. I'm your host, Vin.
I'm Shane.
That's my man, Shane. And we are here to continue to help inspire, uplift, and, well, maybe teach a thing or two about how you can shift your mindset. Because remember, being the 1% does not mean you're a multi-billionaire and you have yachts and Lamborghinis. It could. You're definitely a 1% in that category. But 1% is just a way of life. How do you look for 1% ways to grow yourself? Or how do you even step into the 1% of anything else in life? Because there's categories for all parts of life. Keep striving, keep driving, and we'll see you next time.